Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. I'm Chelsea. You and I both know that. For today's video, I had the absolute pleasure, as you can tell by me, smiling during the entire interview like an absolute buffoon. But I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing the one and only Dr. Steven Hassan. If you don't know who Dr. Steven Hassan is, have you watched my channel at all? Come on. Come on. He's a mental health professional and an expert in undue influence tactics, which, as we know, is brainwashing, and how those tactics are used by authoritarian leaders, high control groups, and destructive cults. His expertise includes harmful influence of destructive religious and political cults, human trafficking, extremist and terrorist groups, one-on-one relationships, families, potential alienation, mini cults, therapy and self-improvement groups, professional and institutional abuse, along with corporate and multi-level marketing programs, and other harmful belief systems. He's the author of 4 books, 3 of which I have on my little shelf over there. I haven't gotten the last one though, and that's Releasing the Bonds and Encouraging People to Think for Themselves, Combating Mind Control, Freedom of Mind, and The Cult of Trump. Dr. Hassan is also the founder of Freedom of Mind Resource Center. Now, I've talked about this multiple times on my channel, not only freedomofmind.com and sending y'all over there for great resources, but also the BITE model, which is about behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control, the influence continuum, and other resources that he has on that website as well. Dr. Hassan helped other people who had been affected by undue influence after he had been deprogrammed from the Moonies cult at age 22 in 1976. We talk about it a little bit during this interview, but the Moonies go by multiple different names, just like how the people in multi-level marketing, network marketing, will at times change the way that they address the industry that they're in, whether it's social selling, affiliate marketing, network marketing, direct sales. It's all the same thing. Doesn't matter what you call it. Now, the Moonies is actually the Unification Church of the United States. Again, they go by multiple different names, and it's all just a front for this cult that Dr. Hassan was convinced to join. Another name that they go by is the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification. The reason why they're often referred to as the Moonies is because the 2 people who are at the top of that cult, the founders of that cult, their last name is Moon. Now, I will have multiple resources, things that we talk about, all linked in the description box below, including some of my favorite interviews, publications, videos, even a TED Talk that Dr. Steven Hassan has done that I absolutely love. The name of that TED Talk is How Do You Know You're in a Cult? And it is just so good. So without further delay, here is my interview with Dr. Steven Hassan, mental health professional and leading cult expert. All right, so thank you so much, Dr. Steven Hassan, for joining me today. I appreciate it. What I wanted to talk about today mainly, as my audience already knows, is multi-level marketing companies, cults, high control groups, and obviously you are the man to come to for that. I know I called you an icon last time and you were like, no, I'm not. You absolutely are amazing, very accomplished, distinguished in this field, not only as a human in general, but in this field. So really my first question to you would be, in your absolute expert opinion, would you say that multi-level marketing companies are cults?
So you're pitching me a difficult, not a softball, but a curveball, and I'll take the liberty to talk from my expert witness perch, if I may, and say that, as you know, I have an influence continuum from ethical to unethical, and my position is that there are cults along the entire continuum, but the difference between ethical cults and destructive authoritarian cults is that ethical cults, you know up front who they are, what they believe, what's going to happen. There's honesty, there's disclosure. You're encouraged to follow your critical thinking and your conscience, and you can talk to anyone you want to talk to, including ex-members or critics, and you can leave without fear or harassment or that you're a failure, etc. So I want to just state, when you say, are MLMs a cult? Absolutely, but then I'll go further and say that in my experience, having worked with lots of former victims, or we prefer to call them survivors, survivor/thrivers. What seems to be happening is authoritarian destructive cultism, and I determine that by behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. The three, if you put the first letters together, is called the BITE model. And my doctoral dissertation, we got such a strong factor analysis on control. We are calling it the BITE model of authoritarian control, because in that side of the continuum, actually people are being remade in the image of the group, where they are a company person versus their true self, and they are obedient, and it's about dogma, and it's about money and power. And typically the heads of these pyramids are very narcissistic or malignant narcissistic. So the bottom line is that my work is to promote human rights, and these types of authoritarian cults deprive people of basic human rights as described in 1948 by the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So forgive me for being long-winded, but I think it's important to really educate everyone how to think about things, because we need to get past confusion where everybody's name calling. I get called, by people who oppose my book, The Cult of Trump. They say I'm in the cult of Soros, or I'm in the cult of the anti-cult, or whatever. And my reaction is not defensive, because I wasn't a cult, so I know the mindset very well. It's like, oh, really? Please explain what brainwashing is to me. I thought I knew what it was, but I'd like to hear your research and what you're basing your opinion on. Why? Because the goal is to empower people to think for themselves and to reality test. And we often can fall into these rabbit holes of beliefs where we think that something bad is going to happen to us if we question, or we take a time out and say, you know what? I haven't had a vacation in 3 years. I'm taking 2 weeks off, and I'm turning off my phone, and I'm chilling, So anyway, forgive me my long-windedness, Chelsea.
No, my subscribers know that I tend to over explain almost every point that I ever make, because I would and it's really the salesperson in me, that I would rather state something and then I know what type of questions I'm going to get or comments I'm going to get, so I'd rather overcome those questions or objections before they even happen. So someone will ask me one question and I'll give them like a 10-minute answer and then answer 70 more questions as well. So I love it. I think it's very,
well,
very helpful.
You know my work, and I appreciate your encouragement and support, because you're doing really important, valuable work.
Ooh,
So thank you.
that means a lot to me. You're about to make me cry. Thank you.
Comment now. I'm going to put my hat on as a mental health professional. I think that when one exits a group that's authoritarian, where you're kind of programmed to put the group ahead of yourself, a lot of people, including myself, was actually, I was thinking I was selfish to think I might want to go back to college, even though the cult told me to drop out of college in the first place. And so, the point is really that we need to have a healthy sense of self. And if someone gives us a compliment, it's okay to receive it and go, yeah, thank you. I've worked really hard. And,
Thank you.
my all my IP and everything else is a result of years of really diligent work. So thank you.
Speaking of actually the mental health side of this, once you do get out of these high control groups, one thing that I have actually been suggesting to people, trying to really drive home in my videos, is once you get out of one multi-level marketing company, a lot of times people will hop to another one because they think the next one's going to be different. They don't see it as a problem with the industry or the whole structure in itself. They see it as just a problem with this team, this upline, this company, and they're not healed, right? So one thing I've been suggesting is, you don't need another multi-level marketing company. You don't need another group. You don't need another solution like that. You need therapy. Like, please, please go to therapy. And so what would you say is a great way to go about that once you have left a multi-level marketing company?
So, I mean, I'm a real big fan of taking the position that it's your mind and you should control it. And so the way I think about therapy is not like deferring to some authority figure to tell you what reality is, but actually working with someone who can teach you, do psychoeducation with you, share stories of how other people have overcome all kinds of, typical symptoms exiting a group like this. So I'm a big fan of encouraging people to read books and take classes and talk to former members, but seek out people who've done their homework like yourself, because you're not going to give bad advice. And I guess I also want to just say a lot of people who get into MLMs grew up in an authoritarian family or
Mm-hmm.
cult them already. And so, if that's the case, if you grew up, if, for example, if you were corporally punished regularly, this is child abuse. And I'm not just saying it as an adjective, but people who are child psychiatrists who study brains and neuroscience, there's actual damage that's done to a child's brain where the child is conditioned to fear authority figures,
Mm-hmm.
anger, or control. So it really impedes on a healthy sense of self. And I have a list on my website of the most common symptoms that people have when they exit a mind control relationship or cult. So, and I'll say that I've been working for the last year on a course to teach mental health professionals how to do therapy. Why? I'm adding this because it's important. Just going to any therapist could be counterproductive to your healing if they don't understand
Yeah.
mind control. And similarly, I would say just because a mental health professional is a former member doesn't mean they've done their own healing and working things out. So you really want to be picky, be a good consumer, interview a few different people. And currently in 2022, most good therapists have a long waiting list. I know I have
Mm-hmm.
all year. And it's frustrating, which is why I'm putting so much of my time and energy to teaching others. Also, because I'm an old fogey, I'm 68, and I'm getting tired, and I want to pass the baton to younger therapists and such.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about hopping from cult to cult is really because you're focused more on content than structure and process. And part of what I'm encouraging people to do is, you know, don't buy into just the words and the beautiful images of, wealthy yachts and mansions, but look at the structure and what was there honest recruitment
Mm-hmm.
or was there a deception, either an outright lie or withholding vital information or distorting it. If there was that already, be careful. And the thing is that you should always feel empowered to challenge authority and ask direct questions. Like if someone says, I'm making, 7 figures, please show me your tax returns for the last 3 years. Oh, you don't trust me? And I'm like, forgive me, but no, I would like to see the data. If you want me to
Exactly.
trust you, give me the proof. And that's where, and that's, I just demonstrated a typical cult turnaround technique. Instead of answering the question honestly and transparently and directly, making it your problem.
Hmm.
What's the matter, Steve? You have trouble trusting? And it's like, no, I don't have trouble trusting people who are trustworthy. I just don't know you, and I want to make sure that I am not spending my time and my money and my energy in anything, much less being asked to recruit family and friends and everyone else that I meet.
Absolutely. I actually saw, I think it was Bill Keith shared or retweeted on Twitter that a therapist it was like a screenshot of a therapist and it was their specialties. And it said like recovery from high control groups and multi-level marketing companies. And when I saw that, I was so excited. It is amazing to hear that you're, working with people to help them get to the point where they can offer help with that. And what's interesting is that a lot of people, because I just got back into therapy. I've been in it my entire life, but I took a hiatus for the past 2 years. But I thought it was very interesting how some people feel like once they get assigned to someone or once they find someone, they think they can't go to someone else. But I personally, I was like, nope, this lady's nice, but I would rather be with someone who, understands my job more, understands like what I do more, since that's probably one of the, highest stressors of my life, just like anyone else. But um,
Yeah,
it's
no, I
okay to be
think,
picky. It's your brain, it's your mental health, it's your life. It's just like a normal doctor.
yep, for sure. I think the purpose of therapy is to help people be functional, to
Mhm.
have healthy relationships, healthy work life, good balance, proper sleep, and all of that, and to get out of therapy. So
Mhm.
again, I always give homework to people that I work with. I want you to watch this documentary and then talk to me about it, or read this book, or talk to this person,
Mhm.
etc. Again, because I don't want them to be dependent on me. I want them to be trusting themselves to stand on their own 2 feet with an internal locus of control in their bodies. And again, it's this, uh, on a certain level, it's role modeling what it's like to have been in one of these things and come
Mhm.
out and lived a great life. I mean, that's the ultimate revenge. I was in the Moonies cult, as you know. Um, Being happy, being successful, getting an education, getting married, having kids, traveling the world,
Mhm.
expanding your experience is it's a joy. And that's why former members are so threatening to mind controllers, because in a sense they're the cure to the phobia. It says if you leave, you will fall apart, or it
Mhm.
shows you're a failure,
Yeah.
whatever, try to generate negative movies in the person's minds. And meeting someone who's like, well, by the way, I was 63 and entered a doctoral program and finished in 2020 because I want to update the law. And I felt like we needed to pull together the theories of brainwashing and mind control and trafficking and undue influence. And I did the first quantitative study on any brainwashing model. And I'm hoping lots of people will try to undo my research or prove what's called falsify it, to
Mhm.
say, no, it's not replicable, Steve. So far, so good. Everybody that's looked at the data is like, whoa.
Mhm.
And again, I wrote a book in 1988, Combating Cult Mind Control, and people have just been reading the book and leaving whatever they're into. So I have many decades of experience that my models correctly describe the phenomenon and what you need to get out. Now we can start generating scientific knowledge that we can then go to judges and juries and argue. What we're up against, frankly, and I love people like Bill Keep and Doug Brooks and Robert
Robert Fitzpatrick.
Fitzpatrick,
Yep.
uh, John Taylor, some legendary people who are just really trying to buck all of the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of lobbying by the by the Direct Selling Association onto politicians and go, no, 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 this is not okay. And I do want to add a thing that's just happened recently. You've heard about the assassination of the former premier in Japan?
Yes, I actually heard about it on one of my favorite podcasts, which is interesting because it's the Tiny Meat Gang podcast. It's a comedy podcast, but they were actually talking about it. And on it, they were like, should we be talking about this? And then they mentioned the Moonies. And I was on the exercise bike and I was like, oh my God, Dr. Hassan, like what is happening? It's
Yeah, no, it's
crazy.
very interesting. And I should say my books were published in Japanese many, many years ago, both Combating and Freedom of Mind. Actually, it was Releasing the Bonds. That was my 2000 book. But what happened was this man made a homemade gun and killed the former premier Abe. And when he was being interviewed or whatever, the police statement said he had been trying to murder the head of the Moonies, the wife of Sun Myung Moon, Hak Jahan, who's doing this World Federation for Peace and Unification, I think is the latest front group name. Anyway, he couldn't get access to her, so he decided to kill Abe because Abe's whole family helped to get the Moonies so much power in Japan. But the reason I'm bringing it up is related to the Bill Keep tangent, point that we were just making. I went off on a little tangent about Japan and the Moonies. But what's really fascinating to me is this man who was 10 years old when his mother got into the Moonies, and the mother gave the family wealth to the Moonies.
Mhm.
So the message was he was disgruntled. Well, he was a former cult member.
Yeah.
Really. But what's really fascinating is that all of a sudden the media is now challenging all of the political parties. And I think they've now discovered 120 politicians with direct ties to the Moonies. And they're kicking them out of the cabinet and they're kicking them out of the party. Why? Because the Moonies were involved with the largest consumer fraud
Mhm.
investigation in Japan. Are you familiar with the spiritual sales? Have you heard
A,
about that, Chelsea?
a little bit. Yes. Yeah.
So, very briefly, but I think your listeners will appreciate hearing some details. The Moonies were basically looking at the newspapers and searching the obituaries, finding out who died, tracking down the address, and knocking on their door of the widow or the widower or the parent of a child that died and saying, we're here because your deceased husband told us we need to come to you because they're stuck in a very low level in the spirit world. And you need to give these people money so they can do an ancestor liberation ceremony to elevate them. So there was like 35,000 Japanese that when they were incredibly grief-stricken and vulnerable got conned into giving hundreds of millions of dollars, if not $1 billion. And there was like a network of lawyers representing all these victims. So the Japanese people have a very bad opinion of the Moonies,
Yes.
right? But one last point, and then I'll be quiet. The media keeps talking about the Unification Church, angry at the Unification Church, but the Moonies don't use that name anymore. That's why they're using the World Federation for
A
Peace
different
and
front. Yeah.
Unification because people don't connect. Oh, this is the same
Mhm.
cult, the one that Moon went to jail in the US for
Yep.
conspiracy to evade taxes. Oh, so anyway, why I'm excited that the Japanese public is up in arms against this cult and all these politicians that take money. And I should add, Trump spoke for Mrs. Moon and
Mhm.
Pompeo and Pence and Esper and Gingrich. But the Japanese people are saying, no way, we don't want politicians that have dirty criminal money. And we need that in the United
Yeah.
States
I wonder
desperately.
what that would be like.
Well,
Yeah.
but it's like consumer awareness.
Yeah.
And frankly, former members of MLMs and other destructive cults are whistleblowers or
Mhm.
potential whistleblowers to say, "Excuse me, this criminal activity is going on. People's minds are getting hacked.
Mhm.
Their lives are being intruded upon. Marriages are breaking up. People are being alienated from their families because of their cultic, mindset and behavior. So we need a revolution of consciousness based on human rights and doing the right thing
Mhm.
and looking after each other
Yeah.
and standing up to bullies and billionaire cult leaders who are exploiting us.
On
Now, how is that for a rant?
I listen, I love a good rant. I love a good rabbit hole. And so do my followers. So they're gonna, I
Well,
bet
hopefully
all
it's
of
not
them
a rabbit hole. Hopefully it's getting out
in
of a rabbit hole.
yes, in the sense of just getting hyper fixated on like one topic and falling down the rabbit hole like that. No, no QAnon stuff. On the topic of standing up to bullies and actually leaving the multi-level marketing company, that's one thing that I get asked probably the most. And I sometimes I do struggle with how to answer that because a lot of my followers probably have gotten this message from me when they ask me, hi, my this person in my family or this person I'm close to, just started this, or they're super into it, or they've lost so much money already. And I always let them know, listen, be supportive, but not supportive of that. Love them through it if you can, and don't demonize them or ever say I told you so, because that's not helpful. But I don't ever want them to like lose that relationship, and I always try to make sure they're aware of that. But what would be your suggestion of the best way to get people out of multi-level marketing companies?
Well, the simple answer is empower them to think for themselves by asking respectful questions and following up. But I really believe that people need to be educated about this man-made mental illness, and it's listed in the APA DSM-5 as a dissociative disorder. So one of the key concepts is understanding that the person isn't dead. They can their real identity is being suppressed by the cult identity. And you got to know at any moment, are you talking to the real authentic self or are you talking to the cult person? And they need to know, in a sense, the rules of indoctrination, which is if you attack the leader of the group, the doctrine, or the policy directly, the cult identity is going to defend and is going to feel persecuted and will withdraw from you, which is why you don't want a frontal assault with documents and data.
Mm-hmm.
This is the proof. We have a government study.
Yeah.
That's not going to help because the cult identity has been programmed to do thought stopping, to feel persecuted, etc. So what's going to help is that love, that unconditional love. It's if it's a family member or a close friend of, I love your beingness. I have real questions about this organization and what they're doing, but I like you and I think you're intelligent and I respect you. So I would like you to know that I would really like to understand your journey. Like what was going on in your life before you ever heard of XYZ group? And walk me slowly through how you heard about it and what your first impressions were, but just like gently, and take the position that, hey, I'm willing to change my minds because I don't want my ego to block me from pursuit of truth. I would rather adopt the scientific method, which is we have hypotheses and then we test them. And we're very eager to find a better hypothesis and reject an earlier hypothesis if we have the data. In other words, it's this kind of where you're opening yourself up to new points of view, versus the opposite, which is, I know the truth with a capital T,
Hmm.
and I'm going to repeat it over and over and over again to myself and everyone else and make people accept it. And it's like, why?
Hmm.
So, but there's more. But the bottom line is that you want the person to realize themselves
Yeah.
this isn't what going to work for them. So that then becomes a matter of dancing with them, or if you know martial arts, just like going with the flow and not trying to do brute force. And using the cult ideology, that's another technique, is using the cult ideology to refute the cult practices
Hmm.
and such. But you have to believe, this is my opinion, if you believe the person's going to leave the group, it's only a matter of how soon and how easily they will leave the group. You can like take down your temperature of worry, because a lot of my clients are seeing images of Jonestown and all the bodies face down on the jungle floor. And I'm like, this is not, the People's
Yeah.
Temple in Jonestown in Guyana. They're living in the city, they're nearby. You can go to lunch with them, etc. And assume they're smart and that they don't want to do something that's going to harm them. Give them a way out, destigmatize it.
I do have a lot of people who come to me and say, "Oh, I can't get out yet," or rather, I want to speak out, but I'm just so scared of, what my upline's going to do to me. My response is usually, to try to rationalize with them and be like, "All right, let's play this game that might not be super fun, but this is what I do. Let's play this game. What is the worst thing that this upline who doesn't even live in the same city as you, isn't close with your family, friends, nothing like that, what's the worst thing they can do?" And then, they'll say, "Oh, well, they can do this." And I'm like, "Well, you've already left the company. So it doesn't matter." So are they going to call your new employer? Are they going to call your husband? Like, what are they going to do? And so that typically does work. But what would you say to someone who does want to speak out, and, wants to help others, but has been scared into silence basically after they've already left?
Well, you're giving good advice, and it's really a therapeutic intervention when somebody has fear to, okay, let's go with it. What's the worst that could happen? Like, visualize it.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the most common phobia is fear of public speaking. Interestingly, there's fear of heights and fear of snakes and a whole bunch of other things. But if you say to someone, okay, Chelsea, you're going to give the first speech you've ever given, what's the worst that can happen? I'll stand there like a dodo and forget everything. Okay, so visualize you're up front, everybody's there to hear you, and you freeze.
Terrifying.
So what?
Yeah.
And then you often say, "Do you think I'm not anxious after 40 years of speaking publicly before I give a talk? It's just that I know I'm human. I'm not
Mhm.
expecting myself to be perfect." In any case, the whole thing about fear is, and this is chapter 10 of the Freedom of Mind book,
Mhm.
is to be able to use your adult frontal cortex to analyze, is there a real danger
Yep.
or is it an imagined danger? Like, a real danger is somebody, standing in front of a charging rhinoceros and not ducking behind the tree. Like, you should be afraid if a rhinoceros is charging you. But if you're watching Jumanji on TV and there's a rhinoceros, you know, coming at you, you know it's a TV and you're not in danger. So you need this ability to discriminate what's really dangerous and what's not. And the truth is the worst that happens is you're standing in front of a group and you're like, "Ah, bah, 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 bah," and people get up and walk out, or
Mhm.
they go, I wasted my time. I came to hear you, Steve, and so life goes on. It's not the end of the world. Or people who have an elevator phobia. They're afraid that the elevator is going to plummet or they'll be trapped for eternity. And I'm like, modern elevators have emergency brakes. They don't plummet, period. And you have cell phones, and there's
Hmm.
often a call button for
Yep.
help. The worst that happens is you pee on yourself or shit on yourself, and you take a
Yeah.
shower and you wash your
Yes.
clothes or throw
Yeah.
your clothes out if you really can't stand it. But it's not life threatening. It's an inconvenience. It's an
Exactly.
embarrassment. And a lot of people are embarrassed to say, yeah, I was in Amway, I was in this, I was in that for years. But so what? Life goes on. And there's a whole movement of other colleagues. Hashtag I got out.
Hmm.
Have you heard of that?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do, like the Me Too movement, yep, I was assaulted, to get it in the public vein so there's an exit ramp for the millions of Americans who've trusted the wrong people and believed lies to go, oh, I'm not the only one. There are many more millions who've been in MLMs and religious cults and political cults.
Absolutely.
But life goes on.
It does. And it happens to way, way more people than a lot of us would like to admit.
People, when they are in a mind control relationship, and there are one-on-one controlling relationships or a cult, and they start realize how unhappy they are or how this is not working and you can't imagine spending the rest of your life there, people need an exit strategy.
Yes.
Right. And so that's another reason why family and friends should always keep touch, so that at that point that the person wants out, they know that they're not going to be like getting a finger wagged at
Mhm.
them. I told you it was a cult, Steve.
Yep.
The Moonies were a cult. Why couldn't you see it? He's a fat Korean billionaire. I'm like, have you heard of something called mind control? Yeah, but you're so smart, Steve. I'm like, yeah. And a lot of other smart people have been lied to and co-opted too. But the point is so you need an exit strategy. And what's so great about the internet is there are people like you. You're not alone anymore. When I was getting out in 76, there was no way to find other ex-members other than a telephone where you dialed circularly and put 10 cents in the payphone. Anyway, it's easy, and then you say like, here's my situation, here's where I'm living, this is how long I've been in, etc., and seek out good advice from people who have experience, make an exit strategy. And then, and part of the exit strategy often is I have friends, I've recruited people,
Mhm.
my family's in it. There's a pretty well-known ex-QAnon guy who recruited his father into QAnon. He exited and has been doing interviews, but he hasn't read my stuff and hasn't gotten his father out yet. But the thing is that there is a value, because once you get labeled as an ex-member, a danger, an apostate, and the leadership says don't talk to them, they're persona non grata, it does make it harder for you to have those interactions with the people you care about. And I personally know dozens of people who are married with kids in groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses or the Mormons
Yeah.
that they're miserable in it, but they love their family and they don't want to lose that connection. So they stay in which case I recommend just keep yourself centered and grounded, get the support you need, but then there are techniques to educate your family and friends indirectly.
Yep.
So if there's a documentary about Nexium, and it goes into NLP and hypnosis and how people would have meetings with the cult leader for hours and come out and not even remember a single thing, you watch it together with your loved ones to start planting the seeds that this type of mind hacking is a reality, right? And then you find other examples that they would say, oh, yeah, that's a destructive cult. Oh, yeah, Jim Jones, definitely. Heaven's Gate, definitely.
LuLaRoe.
Lulu, well, so people who've watched the documentary, oh, that was so obvious. That was an interesting one,
Hmm.
and I did interview Roberta Blevins, who was in that cult and such. But that was an interesting one because there was a Mormon family at the top of that pyramid,
Hmm.
and the media is still very afraid to name the big cults, the ones that have politicians and they have law enforcement, and the CIA and the FBI and police that are Mormons. But I'm going to do another little tangent, but my question is, if you're in a group and you are following a living prophet, and yet you have a job where you have to follow the Constitution, if the prophet says don't do X, but you know in your conscience the Constitution says Y, where's your loyalty going to be? And so I'm really concerned about this point because we need to have law enforcement who has no split allegiances. I'm for encouraging hope,
Hmm.
that we can rise to the challenge and not just go, they're too powerful, they're too wealthy. No, and with psychological responses, you can like freeze, you can get numb, you can fight, you can run away.
Hmm.
I'm for fighting.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
for like I want to do stuff. I want to go to bed at night with a clear conscience, feeling like I'm not just a bypasser in with this experience, and that I'm
Hmm.
trying to use 46 years, that's after my deprogramming, 46 years of knowledge. I'm doing lots of academic chapters and textbooks and journal articles and peer reviewed journals, but I really want to change the law and criminalize mind control because it would shut down all of MLMs.
We talked about that. And since then, I've decided to finish my undergrad degree and
Yay.
an attempt, I say attempt because I know it's really hard and I want to be realistic, but attempt to actually go to law school.
Great.
Yeah, instead of, I mean, obviously, yes, I'm doing my part and using my platform, but I want to be able to go further than that and help where I can.
I'm
So
very excited to hear you say that. There are some states that don't require an undergrad degree to get into law school or
I
become a
do know
lawyer.
that. I know that from watching Kim Kardashian. Unfortunately, I don't live in one of those states. I have to, if I'm in Florida, I
Okay.
have to have it. Yeah, I wish.
Okay.
I wish.
But I'm very fascinated by the law. I'm part of a forensic think tank at Harvard Medical School comprised of forensic psychiatrists, psychologists, attorneys, and we have a weekly meeting where we present issues where the law and mental health come together
My two favorite
for
things.
expert witnesses. And it's just been an amazing education for free to attend these meetings and learn from everybody. My worry currently is that there's so many bad judges that have been put into place, in particular federal judges,
Mhm.
as well as several people on the Supreme Court that I don't believe should be on the Supreme Court at all. It's also really good for your sense of self to accomplish something like getting a law degree, becoming a lawyer, or for me becoming a PhD and people calling me doctor, because I've spent so many years where I'm just the ex Mooney,
Mhm.
the ex Mooney with a master's in counseling. Nobody believes him, but all of a sudden I'm a doctor,
Yeah.
and now I'm like taken seriously, which is
Yeah.
great.
I'd say that's definitely part of it as well. And I've always had a fascination with the law. And then also I have the great talent of not being able to shut up, being quite a good conversationalist in regards to, sticking up for not only what I think is right, but what is right and the law. And even if I can't stand someone, but if they are being defamed, I will set someone straight and be like, hey, we can't say that. You need to use protective language. You can't say that, this is a fact when it's absolutely clearly not. Like, we don't know that. Funny you mentioned that, because that's one of the things I was like, I want to be more than just the 30-year-old lady on YouTube that calling out scammers and cults. I want to be able to do more than that. Speaking of
You're so
that,
young from my point of view. Seriously, the world is your oyster because you're
it is.
smart and you're ambitious and you're talented and you're creative. So you just decide and think
Mhm.
ahead. Like, I'm a big advocate for telling people to develop skill sets, especially if you're not sure what you want to do. And the other thing, aside from skill sets, and one of the biggest one is public speaking, by the way, to feel comfortable in front of others and
Mhm.
express ideas. So you want to be future oriented and have a goal. You can change it, but have a goal.
Mhm.
Well, a lot of people are like waiting. A lot of people have this pressure, as I did. Steve, you're 17. You have to decide what you want to do for
Yes.
your career. Well, I want to recommend the book by Bruce Feiler, Life in the Transitions, I believe is the title. And he did quantitative research for this book, and he found out people have 5 different careers on average, and that people often fall into what really turns them on because of a negative thing that happens
Mhm.
in their life. In his case, he had cancer and he was facing his death. Different people have different things. Look at me. I mean, being in the Moonies and having Robert Lifton say, you actually know more than I know and you should study psychology, changed my life direction. Learning from lawyers and
Mhm.
forensic psychiatrists about the law. And that's where one of the professors said, you need a doctorate and I'll supervise your research and go to fielding and blah, blah, blah. It changed my whole direct one introduction. Just whoosh. But I'm not done yet. We'll see where
I
it
I
carries
love
me.
that. And that's actually one thing I do talk about quite a bit, is because I have, whenever I'm, doing more like reaction videos, MLM top fail videos, things like that, it absolutely just breaks my heart when I hear a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, this beautiful young girl who has so much ahead of them. Like, they are a child. Their brains are possibly not even fully developed yet. And they'll say, I was so lost. I was so broken. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I'm like, you're duh. No one knows what they want to do. Like, you don't have to know. Like, your 20s, you don't have to have this. And obviously society does it to us too. But when you're in, or when they're trying to get you into a multi-level marketing company, a lot of times they will really twist that pain point of, well, you don't know what you're doing. I didn't either. I felt lost. And you're going to feel like at home here. And this is going to be your career and it's great and you don't have to look anymore. And it's like, no, your 20s are a mess and it's beautiful and they're supposed to be. Like, I worked so many different jobs, so many different places. My husband would always make fun of me because he always had one W-2 around tax time, and I'd be like, nope, wait, hold on, there should be 2 more coming, because I would always switch jobs whenever there was a
Mm-hmm.
better comp plan or whatever, because I was in inside sales my entire 20s. But I just think it's so interesting and, again, heartbreaking when they say like, oh, I was so broken, and it's like, yeah, you're gonna be lost. You don't know what you want to do. You're hardly even an adult.
So I would be like, hey, you're not alone, would be my verbalization to someone who's saying they're broken. And we have a pretty good idea now neuroscientifically that our frontal cortex needs to 25 or 26
Mm.
to fully mature. And if you were raised and your mother was drinking alcohol in the womb, you might need more. You might need another 5 years of enriched interaction with people to grow up. But human beings need each other.
Mhm.
And this is part of what is terrible is the fragmentation and the polarization of people, where people don't even know their neighbors, or they're afraid to talk to someone from a different religious tradition, or someone who's an atheist if you're a believer. Like, expand your world and learn and have that kind of get out of the perfectionism model and get into the learning
Yeah.
feedback growth model is my advice. I want to mention, I don't think I have the book here, but I'm about to interview a woman who was raised in the Children of God cult. Have you ever
Ooh,
heard of that?
yes.
It
Yeah.
was started by a pedophile who claimed to be a prophet, and they
Hmm.
were ordered to molest little babies and children and send women out as hookers. Anyway, she ran away from that cult at age 15. She was horribly abused, and she had no money. And she got into public school and decided to join the military because they would pay for college. And she became a captain in the army.
Damn.
And then she of intelligence, I should add, brilliant woman, and she had a meltdown because she never did her healing homework from having
Mhm.
grown up in a mind control cult. And the military is its own closed system to a certain extent.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as a mind control cult, but certainly boot camp training. And one thing I learned from reading her book was just how horribly treated women are in the military,
Mhm.
like horribly
Yeah.
treated. And she was like one of the first to say, "Excuse me, you've just told us that we need to wear our Kevlar vests flush against our chests, otherwise we won't be protected. I have breasts.
Hmm.
What do I do?"
Actually, it's interesting, but like hilarious that you mentioned that because me and my husband took his a bunch of his like cop stuff to get his uniforms. I don't know why I just like cop stuff. His uniforms to get
Yeah.
fitted, and I'm just standing there with the Kevlar vest, and I'm like, I'm just gonna put this on. So I just like strapped it up, and I was like, this is awful. I was like, babe, there's so much space in here. I was like, do the girls like, is it fitted differently? He's like, yeah, a little bit, but not much. I was like, I need to talk to the sheriff. We need to fix this because this is awful. Like,
And it doesn't
yeah.
protect you if it's not flush, apparently, from the force of a bullet. The book is called Uncultured, and it's coming out in a couple of weeks. And
Nice.
I like to listen to books, especially if the author reads them, and she
Mhm.
read it. And man, it was an education for me because I've talked to veterans, but not this was someone from my tribe, so to speak,
Mhm.
having been in a mind control cult. Anyway, she's happily married and she's getting her master's from Harvard Business Development, I believe.
Love that.
But anyway, it's a book I want to plug because it's great, and I'm going to
Yeah.
interview her for my podcast, The Influence Continuum.
What are some other books or other resources other than obviously my favorite one, yours? What would be
You were
other one?
just saying that because I'm
I
on, but
hey,
thank
I
you.
have I have three of your books right over there off
Mm,
screen, so that I've
mm.
read all of them.
Thank you. I've been doing interviews, and I have like Robert J. Lifton interviewed in his 90s, and he's still sharp. And if you're interested in this field, like, he's a legend and he's still alive. Margaret Singer passed years ago, and as the Jolly West. So I'm going to do a plug for my 3.5 hour course on my website. And when this new course comes out, which is close to 10 hours,
Ooh.
it's geared for mental health professionals, but other people have already watched it as I was beta testing it, and they said, wow, this is great. And I'm so glad I took it. So that's coming out. Depends on what your interest is. I always tell people, follow what you're interested in. Some people are very interested in developmental psychology. Some people are really interested in business theory and what's a
Mhm.
healthy business. Um, did you happen to catch Jason Kander, my last interview on my podcast? He was an Army captain intelligence who was a rising star in politics, and he had a meltdown and realized he had been having PTSD for 10 years and
Oh,
never got therapy, and he dropped out of politics, and now he's taking care of himself and
good for him.
vets. And before that, I interviewed Ira Chaleff,
Hmm.
who wrote The Courageous Follower and Intelligent Disobedience. Brilliant stuff. I'm a big fan of John Atack. Do you know John's work?
I am familiar, yes.
So he has a YouTube channel. It's JONATACK, and he's brilliant, and he does a lot of interviews himself. So anyway, it's a journey. We're living at a historical moment where we really have a chance to evolve,
Hmm.
or we're going to devolve.
Yes.
And I'm doing everything in my power to lift people up and inspire them and give them hope, and so we can evolve and fix the mess that's been developing over decades in the United States with all this right wing infiltration trying to destroy the separation of church and state, and taking away women's right to choose over their own health care, gay rights, etc. I just really think that people have to stop spending so much time on video gaming and binge watching fiction, and like roll up your sleeves. We have a midterm coming up, and we have a presidential election in 2 years. Get involved in local politics.
Hmm.
Like, find out who's on the school board, if you, especially if you have children, because the other side is very organized about wanting to ban books
Hmm.
because it's teaching things that they don't like. I'm going to add one more fun fact.
Yeah.
So when I was interviewed on Brian Stelter's program, Reliable Sources, on
Hmm.
CNN, he was fired recently, and we mentioned the cult of Trump. The Tennessee legislature passed a bill saying CNN was fake news because they did that interview with me.
Oh,
So
Lord.
I'm waiting for the cult of Trump to be on the banned book, that's going to get burned.
It is quite interesting though, because I mean, even what Biden came out and said, even he clarified, he's like, I'm not saying that every conservative, that every, Republican is, a horrible person, a bad person. He's like, I'm talking about the people who are threatening democracy. Saying the
Inciting violence is,
exactly. And it's very interesting that a lot of people, just like we were talking about the spectrum there with the cultiness, that I mean, there's also a political scale there too. Just because you are a libertarian, a Republican, a Democrat, a progressive, whatever else you want to call yourself, doesn't mean that you want to agree with every little thing that whatever candidate says. It's more about policy, but also doesn't, like, you shouldn't just put people in like little boxes and then just
right.
think, okay, I'm never going to talk to that person because they read the book, oh, the cult of Trump. It's like, no, what are you doing? Talk to them, have a logical and rational conversation. But a
Yeah,
lot
and
of times people can't do that.
people need to understand I'm not name calling. I was in a cult. I'm just describing the
Exactly.
behaviors that are problematic. And I think the president, if I had my way, I would be encouraging him to educate the citizens about mind control and brainwashing,
Mm-hmm.
because the people who are still walking around thinking Putin is a good guy and doing God's will, and Moscow should be the third Rome, and that the election was stolen, they're in mind control cults. They're like not looking at the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them are in these what's called New Apostolic Reformation groups. Have you heard that term?
I haven't. It sounds fascinating.
I wrote about it in The Cult of Trump. They're basically, it's a form, and the media's mischaracterized Trump's base as evangelical Christians. New Apostolic Reformation people, the leaders say they're a prophet or an apostle who speaks directly to God and gets direct revelations and speaks in tongues and casts out demons and does faith healing and is homophobic. People are getting exercised because they are attracted to the same sex or whatever, and they come out more traumatized.
Yeah.
Um, but this is 40 million Americans who are in these groups, and they're following their apostle who said that Trump won the election. They're not listening to the evidence, looking at all the 60 judges and court hearings that said no, there wasn't widespread voter fraud at all. The president, in my opinion, needs to own up to the fact that people can be indoctrinated into these totalistic authoritarian belief systems and cults.
Mm-hmm.
And we're missing legislation that can rein in the social media platforms, that can protect our private data
Mm-hmm.
so that it's not used against us and weaponized. And, greed needs laissez-faire capitalism doesn't work because greedy people want more. So we see the fossil fuel industry going, we need to make as much money as we can. Damn that there are heat waves and floods and earthquakes. No, this is our planet. This is our habitat.
Yeah.
We want a safe place for our children and many generations of our grandchildren and great grandchildren. So we can't afford to let the billionaires who want to push their agenda on us to dictate things. And unfortunately, politics and money, when the Supreme Court affirmed terrible name, Citizens United. It's not about Citizens United. It's about wealthy, dark money on the left and the right, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not just the right. But we need transparency. We need honesty. We need an independent press that isn't just, oh, we can't say that because one of our advertisers would be upset with us. That's not going to help save democracy.
I completely agree with that. And it's funny how that, again, funny, not haha, funny, interesting, how that ties into the, not only obviously the cult aspect of that and brainwashing overall. Obviously that's, the umbrella of all of this, then even the multi-level marketing aspect of it too. They'll see the title of that book. They'll see a title of my video or hear, oh, well, you're, calling multi-level marketing companies a cult. Well, you're crazy, or, you're exaggerating. You're just a hater. You're a jealous hater with a broke mindset. And it's like, well, how about you just watch the video and maybe you'll see something different. Hopefully, obviously sometimes it doesn't happen, but it's quite interesting how that works.
Yeah, they don't read and they don't watch.
Mm-mm.
And what I recommend to families is to make a deal with your loved one. You share something that was really impactful for you, that directed you to the belief system you're in. Let's watch it together. Let's
Mm-hmm.
hit the pause button and discuss it as we're watching it. And then I'll have my turn and I'll share something that I think is persuasive and influential. And we'll hit the pause button and discuss it. Then it will be your turn. Because eventually we'll figure out what's real.
Mm-hmm.
But let's do it together. And not because we're attacking each other and putting each other down, or one side is trying to be right and make the other side wrong. No, let's just pursue truth together because nobody's perfect and no one has the whole picture. I certainly don't. I do know what I know. And the problem of undue influence, in my opinion, and you're saying you want to be a lawyer, the law needs to codify a way to evaluate undue influence, more than just saying underage or elderly with dementia. And we have trafficking law, fraud, force, or coercion. It doesn't have to be all three. And MLMs and other destructive cults are fraud and coercion.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we mean by coercion? Behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control to make a new identity that's dependent and obedient.
Absolutely. Ooh, what a goosebumps walk away to end it on. That was real good.
Yeah, thank you so much and continued success. And let's stay in touch.
Of course, right back at you. I appreciate your insight as always and appreciate your time as well. Thank you so much. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed that interview. As you could probably tell, and as many of you know, I really admire Dr. Stephen Hassan and all that he has done. He's definitely someone that from a professional standpoint, I admire the work that he does, and I have the utmost respect for him and his work and his story as well. As I said before, I will have everything linked down below that we mentioned, talked about, and then other great resources too. And just to end this video, I do just want to say thank you so much. Recently, we hit 90,000 subscribers, and even more so than that, I just want to say absolutely thank you so much from the bottom of my very soul. I appreciate you. Today, I got to interview someone that I respect so much, and this was honestly a crazy opportunity for me, and I wouldn't have been able to do it if it wasn't for you guys. So, again, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being there, engaging with my content, sharing my content, and I hope that this video was helpful to you. I wanted to focus on how to help people get out of multi-level marketing companies, and like I said, that is a question that I get a lot. So, I hope this was helpful to you. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I clearly did. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.